you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Voss here from thechris.com. Welcome to the big show, as always, my family and friends. For 16 years, 3,000 episodes, we bring in the oldest living podcast in existence out of a handful still left, and we're the only ones out of that handful that are still writing daily podcasts and episodes that we're putting up. So be sure to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss1 on the TikTok, and all those crazy places on the internet. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book success. Today, amazing young lady on the show, we're going to be talking about her book entitled In the Covenant of the Ark, A Prophetic Journey of Hope by Judith Armour. We're going to get into it with her book and her details and all of that good stuff. She retired from academia. She received her degree in chemistry from Rutgers University and CAS. She's the author of several scientific journal articles on her research on PCBs as environmental pollutant. While employed at the Food and Drug Administration in Washington, D.C., she developed a curriculum for teaching genetics to allied health professionals while employed at the Medical College of Ohio. And more importantly, she is the founder of the Open Door Ministry for the Homeless in Toledo, Ohio. She served the Catholic Church for over 45 years on roles in healing ministries, spiritual direction, evangelization initiatives, interfaith dialogue, retreat direction, and synod discussions. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Welcome to the show. How are you there, Judith?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Did I pronounce that right? Synod discussions? Synod discussions. I've learned something new on the show every day, thanks to folks like yourself. So give us a .coms, websites. Where do you want people to find out more about you on the interwebs?
JudithArmour.com.
All right. And is there 2 R's or 1 R in there?
2 R's.
2 R's. Good to know for folks. Now, give us a 30,000 overview, if you would, of what's inside your new book.
The book is about my prophetic journey. A little prologue is that one time the Lord woke me up from my sleep with a bright light and a jolt. I was literally jolted awake. And I thought the house was struck by lightning. And I found out it was a clear night, so that wasn't the answer. I looked, see if this electric blanket shorted out, and that wasn't the answer. And all of a sudden I hear the Lord say, "You've been baptized in the Holy Spirit." And I'm going, oh no, this is a psychotic moment. The scientist in me was trying to logically process what was taking place. And he said to look in 1 Corinthians 12, and it was all the gifts of the Holy Spirit. It's faith, wisdom, knowledge, healing, discernment, prophecy, tongues, interpretation of tongues, and miracles. And I said, which of these gifts do I have? And he says, you have all of them. But the most pronounced of those gifts is the prophetic. And the prophetic is the Lord speaking through a person, either to a worshiping community or a community of usually of believers, to just encourage the community or call them to reconciliation. Anyway, so that gift, that prophetic gift, is usually a gift of words, but for me, it was more than that. It was actually having to live out each of the prophetic messages that the Lord wanted to impart. And so you'll find that in the book, all the threads of my life come together and are the fruits of what the Lord is saying. I will talk about not only the environment and life, but the book is a beautiful love story of what the Lord wants to say to all mankind. And it's based on the prophecy of Joel, where Joel in chapter 3, verse 1 says that a time will come when the Lord will spread his spirit upon all mankind, and your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old will dream dreams, and the young will see visions. And I believe that we're probably coming to that time when the Lord is really reaching out to his people and calling them to himself. And I think we see that through all the revivals that are taking place all around the world, particularly the 30,000 that descended on the University of Asbury in Kentucky. And that is being mimicked throughout the world. And just a lot of young people are being called into the Lord's service.
Huh. I missed the 30,000. What was the reference on the news on that?
That was 30,000 young people descended on the University of Asbury in Kentucky over a course of days, to where they actually had to shut down the town because they couldn't handle any more people coming into the town.
When was this?
And this was probably, I want to say, maybe 9 months ago.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And that's happening throughout the world in a lot of different countries, where the young people are really being called. I have two grandsons that are in college at the University of Pittsburgh, and they said 2 years ago they started with 10 in their Bible study, and now they're up to 300. So there is a sense of that young people are particularly being called into a relationship with the Lord. And it's, while my book is based on my own Catholicism, this is happening in many Christian religions. And in fact, it's going across religious lines. And there's even been reports about some of the Muslims that have been converted as well. That's the basis of the book, is a love story in that the Lord wants to gather all of his people at some point in time. How that will take place was a mystery to all of us. He said, no one knows the time or the day until it's upon us. So the book is a beautiful telling of so many things, that particularly it's a book of healing. It started with my own personal healing. And I said, okay, Lord, why did you pick me? And he said, because even as a child, you had great faith. And he took me through all of my childhood. And he showed me all of the times of isolation and loneliness and healing and fear, and that how he was in each one of those instances. And the child within was being healed. So he was bringing me into wholeness and seeing how I even acted out of that brokenness. And it was a beautiful thing for me. It was a real freedom taking place within me.
Oh, wow.
We each have, we're born with free will. So we have the choice of three choices. We can go through life with our own desires and trying to satisfy what we want. We can cooperate with what the Lord's plan for us is, and we can either choose the path of sin, and obviously that would be self-destruction in many cases. And the beautiful thing that will come out at one chapter in the book is where I talk about how the Open Door started, which was the ministry for the homeless.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a beautiful telling of the Lord's healing.
How long have you been doing that work over? How long have you been doing that work over there?
I started this back in 1983, and life has taken me many different directions. I've moved around the country quite a bit, but at that time, several people had died of hypothermia within the streets of Toledo.
Oh, no.
And I just felt, how could this be happening? Because a renaissance was taking place in the city at the time. And I went to my spiritual director and I said, I think the Lord is calling me to start a shelter for the homeless. And he said, yes, don't go home until you find a place for them to live. And he said, call me at 5:30 tonight. And I'm going, oh, you've got to be crazy. But anyway, I drove down the street that he told me I should drive down, and there I saw the homeless climbing out of dumpsters, sleeping in doorways. And I said, okay, this is real. And I saw a building for sale, and I made arrangements to meet with the realtor for that building. And when I got into it, it was a building that was just totally destroyed inside. I mean, there was broken glass and plaster fell from the ceiling. The woodwork was rotted. But I could see the bare bones of this building was so beautiful that there was stained glass, there were reliefs on the ceiling, and a beautiful spiral staircase coming down that looked like it had been mahogany at one point in time.
Oh, wow.
And so when I left, I said, okay, Lord, what was that all about? And he said, that was my people. It was created to be a beautiful structure, perfect and beautiful in every way. But he said, just like my people, time, tragedies, and events took place that left it in ruin. And so my people are left in ruin, and I desire to bring them back to the beauty that I created them to be. One thing led to another. I think, okay, this building is going to take millions of dollars to renovate, and so that's not a thing. That's not going to happen for me. I had no money at the time for this ministry. I went to give a talk at a Full Gospel Men's Club, and I said, and we had a terrible blizzard at that time, and I said, oh, don't do your talk. Let's just sit and have lunch, and you can come back another time when we have better attendance. And they said, tell us what you want to do. And I said, first of all, I have to find a board of directors, and then I have to find a shelter. So the board of directors, they said, here we are. And there were 12 men there. And one was an accountant, one was an attorney, one was a doctor. One person agreed to live on site and be the director. Wow. And I had another Christian organization that said, we have blanket organization for any new ministry that comes into being, and we will cover you until you can be licensed. Wow. And I had the person that was in charge of veteran affairs. And so many of our homeless are indeed veterans. Yeah. So it was the full complement of everything you would need for the best board of directors you could have. And I said, okay, now I need a shelter. So I decided I was going to go to the bishop of the Toledo Diocese and ask him if he had any buildings that were willed to the church that might be abandoned that I could use. And he said, oh, yes, I have 5. Take your pick. And he said, we'll cover the taxes and the insurance on it, but this ministry has to take place outside of the diocese because we just don't have the resources to do it. And I'm thinking, okay, wow, this is a good start.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that came into it being. So when the state came in to finally license us, they said, how long did it take you to start this ministry? Because you have really good track record for rehabilitation of the homeless. And I said, 3 months. And he said, no, do you mean 3 years? And I said, no, 3 months, since that's impossible. And I said, all things are possible with God. When he wants something done and we step in faith, it will happen. That ministry has now been in existence for 43 years now. And they've expanded because I'm no longer part of it, but it's expanded to 3 different facilities, and they've actually rehabilitated over 1,000 people, went from homelessness to productive lives. Mm-hmm. There's a beautiful story, too, about one of the homeless men. And this is a real example of God's love and how he is with us every step of our journey. And I talk about it in there because it's one of the most beautiful stories of a miracle, I think. Henry was released from the hospital after quadruple bypass surgery, and he was sleeping on a bench in the city on a very cold day. And the director of our house went and said, no, come into the open door and we'll give you shelter. So he came in, and he was very much a father figure for 8 months that he lived in the facility. And then one day he came and he said, you're going to have to leave because I'm back on drugs and alcohol, and I can no longer be an example for the rest of the men in the house. And I said, I'm sorry to see you go because you've been such a good inspiration for these younger men. And he disappeared, and I hadn't seen him it was 3 months. And the Lord just laid on my heart that I had to go find Henry. So I went to Mass that morning, and I met the house director that was on site. And I said, Jeff, what are you doing today? He said, I'm going to look for Henry. And I said, that's what I was going to ask you if you would go with me, because as a woman, I don't want to go to these places by myself. So we knew that this was a mission. We had to find Henry. So we stopped and we got him his favorite. He loves submarine sandwiches. So we got him a submarine sandwich, got him some clean socks and underwear and shoe polish. He had a fetish about clean shoes. So we went to the docks, we went to the farmer's market, and we went to a lot of seedy hotels. And it's funny about the third seedy hotel. They said, yeah, Henry's up on the second floor. We knocked on the door, and Henry fell to his knees and sobbed for a very long time. We said, Henry, what's going on? He said, today's my birthday. And he said, and I prayed to the Lord, if there's a God in heaven, show me one person that cares about me. And he said, he not only sent me one, but he sent me two. And so we were able to celebrate Henry's birthday with him. And that's where the Lord says, not one sparrow falls to the ground that he doesn't know about it. And that's this. I can't tell you how many beautiful miracles took place through that ministry. And that's just one of the many examples in the book of miracles that the Lord has brought about in healing ministry that we started. There's another part where the Lord had said to me, I'm going to give you a ring of 12 gems. And I had no idea what that meant. He said, you're the diamond. And so I went to my spiritual director and I said, okay, do you have any idea what this means? And he says, yeah, but tell me when the 12th gem comes in. So I had a neighbor that had moved in just a couple weeks before, and I had met her one time. She comes knocking on my door, and she said, you go to the same church I do. Do you believe in the gift of prophecy? And I said, yes, I do. And she said, the Lord told me that I had to come to you and tell you that I'm the emerald and he's the gem cutter. And I had only met this woman one other time, and I said, wow, that's kind of taking me aback. A couple weeks later, two other women came to me and they said, we're supposed to pray with you. And I'm the onyx and and Madeline's the sapphire. And okay, so now we're up to 4. I went to a retreat in Michigan, and the Lord pointed out the person that was leading the music, someone that I would be praying with. We counted off, and at the same time, the Lord was saying to her in prophetic word that pointed me out to her. And we counted off from 1 to 14 to form groups, and we were both number 1, and we ended up in the same group. And our friendship has now 45 years later, all of these gems came together. All 12 of them came together in amazing ways. So when I went to my spiritual director, I said, oh, the 12th one is in. And he said, this is a sign of divine creation. And the bishop says, when the 12th one is here, you're going to start the healing ministry and you're going to be holding retreats at the mother house of the Mercy Sisters in Fremont, Ohio, which was several communities over from where I lived. And that Father Carl, my spiritual director, would be the priest on site. So we started these ministries, this retreat that we would hold every 2 months, and amazing healings took place through that. All of these women had the prophetic gift and had the gift of healing, and we were all contemplatives. We all prayed in silence. So we would come together and pray in silence, and the Lord would instruct us how we were to pray for healing. We had one case where a woman came in, and she literally had a pressurized suit on and a nurse's aide with her. And the Lord said, before the end of the weekend, she will be dancing upon the altar. Well, it turned out she had a very, very rare disease that only 7 people in the world had.
Oh, wow.
And she was so healed that at the end of the weekend, she truly was dancing on the altar. Wow. And she became the head of the music ministry for the diocese in Toledo. Her neurosurgeons came and spoke at a conference of 3,000 people saying that this was truly a miracle, that no one had ever been healed of this disease. And we would have these things happening, and it was just absolutely amazing. So this is the story of my life. Those are just 2 instances that are mentioned in the book. And of course, I was a research scientist for the Food and Drug Administration, and I was given a ton of fish. And they said, okay, you have to figure out what's in these fish that's messing up our DDT analysis. And then you have to figure out how you can separate them out so we have the integrity of the DDT. It turned out that they were PCBs, which was a plasticizer that had thousands of uses. And we found out that it had become a global pollutant, and it was in eagles, it was in large fish, and soon we found it in mother's milk. And it turned out that a transformer had leaked into an estuary, and the cows that drank from it had ingested the PCBs, and then it in turn moved up the food chain. From then on, it became a need that we had to try to get an injunction not to have them in such expansive use. And so we worked with the government, we worked with international governments. I did reports to the President's Cabinet Committee on the Environment. And it just shows us that in Genesis, we see that man was going to be in charge of the birds of the air and the fish of the sea. And truly, this was wisdom imparted to me because I was this was one of my first jobs out of college, and I was able to create the methodology. So when the Lord asked me, it was back in 2023. At the time, I was 76 years old.
Wow.
And I'm going to be 80 next week, so that's kind of crazy. But I always ask at the beginning of Lent, I always say to the Lord, show me my sin. And we all have unconscious sin and we don't realize that we have. So I'm thinking, it's going to be sloth because, man, at the age of 76, you don't have a lot of energy. You're not able to do a whole lot of things. And instead, the Lord said, no, it's the sin of omission. You have never written about your spiritual journey. And I'm thinking, oh, dear God, you can't be asking me this. I've written numerous journal articles, but as a scientist, you're writing about math, molecules, and methodology, which is pretty terse and not great prose. So I was thinking, you don't understand. You know me, Lord. You know that I didn't have great grades in English literature or writing. Of course, once I ended up with the technical writing that we had to do in college, it was very direct and not a lot of adjectives and Oxford comma. Thinking, okay, I'll try to do this. And I started writing the book on Ash Wednesday. And I got to Holy Thursday, and I'm saying, okay, we got to wrap this up here. And the last two chapters of the book, as I started to write them, it was like I was just typing and the Lord was dictating. And chapter 10, when it ended up, it was quite a shock to me. I have to say, this is not ending on a happy note. I might be burned at the stake by the Diocese of Toledo, not Toledo, Philadelphia, where I live now. And I said, it was a prophecy that I had been given early on in my journey. And the Lord had said, a time will come when they will bind you with a girdle, sever your hands, and you need not lay your hands to pray, merely command it in my name, and so it'll be done. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, a girdle. All I could think of is modern version called Spanx. But I looked it up, and it was in biblical times, it was the rope that they used to cinch their waists of their robes. And so that made a lot more sense. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to stay away from chainsaws, meat slicers, and lawnmowers. But it turned out that it was a metaphor. And that in the end, when I came into this diocese, I said the first diocese I was in, they empowered the laity. The second diocese I was in, they formed the laity. And this one, they were afraid of the laity. And of course, we were in the midst of the terrible scandal that was taking place in the church. And literally, I really didn't have the backing of the hierarchy to continue any of my ministries in healing or with the homeless. I fed the homeless and cooked for them and served in a soup kitchen, but I didn't have the freedoms to do what I did before. So that was the metaphor. And then the last chapter 11 is the beautiful chapter of the covenant, where the Lord had showed me a dream, and this was early on, 30 years before, maybe. And he woke me up from the dream and he said, let me explain the dream to you. And it was the covenant. And that's covered in the last chapter of the book. And I realized that all of the strings and strands of my life had come together in a beautiful way, in that I had been involved with many interfaith dialogues, had served in interfaith settings. And the Lord was telling us about a time of gathering when all mankind would come together. And it's just a beautiful love story. And I wept when I read the ending because I didn't see it coming.
Oh, wow.
So the book was finished by Good Friday.
Oh,
And
wow.
I said, okay, now I have to figure out how do you get this published. And before I knew it, in my thousands, I actually get, I think, about 900 promotional things in my email every day that I have to clean up, was a publisher called Covenant House. And so I said, oh, okay, I'll send it to them. And they say they do the copywriting and the editing and the formatting and the cover design. So it was all going to be taking place by them. So I sent them the manuscript, and within weeks, literally, they said, yes, we want to publish this book. So the book was published, and by Thanksgiving, I had the hard copy in my hand. So I wrote the book in 40 days, and it was published and out there. It was a miracle on how it came to be because, and again, a very simple language. At one point in time, I'd become a youth minister, and so I thought, I really want this to be readable by young people. Let them see that they have a choice in life, and that there isn't a moment that the Lord isn't with us, that he dwells among us, and he's always with us, bringing us to wholeness and holiness and filling our life with joy. And I think that's the theme of the book, is hope and joy.
Hope and joy. What a wonderful thing. That's the beautiful thing about human beings, and their always admiration towards hope. Right, Judith?
Correct.
Now, any forthcoming books that we might see in the horizon? Any secondary books to this book?
I doubt it. Like I said, I'm going to be 80 next week.
Congratulations.
Sloth is very much a part of my life right now.
You got to pace yourself. I've done that. I'm at 58 and I do that. You got to slow down a little bit and take your time and enjoy. I think you learn to enjoy life when you get older too. You're not so much caught up on the rat race, and you can kind of drink it in a little bit more and enjoy it. But congratulations.
Grandchildren, they keep me busy.
They keep you busy. Yeah, that'll do it. But no, I mean, I remember when I turned 50, I wrote some boo posts on Facebook. It was part of his comedy because I entertain. And so it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. But someone wrote me and they go, Chris, a lot of people don't make it to 50. Maybe you should just be happy being 50 and quit complaining. And I was like, wow, okay. That felt that arrow in my heart. But that's true. And so congratulations on making it to 80. And we had somebody on the show last week that told me that they expect to live to 125 or 35. I can't remember which. And that if they're lucky, they'll get to 150. And after that, they don't care how old they get. So I thought that was an interesting perspective.
I always remember my grandmother saying, oh, I'm 93. Why God leave me here so long?
Why did leave me here so long? I was talking to one of the people who host the Chris Voss hosting service up on the web and stuff. And they're like, yeah, we have a 98-year-old woman who's doing podcasting. She started when she was 95.
Oh, bless her heart.
Bless her heart. You go,
bless
girl.
Her heart, yeah.
And so hopefully I'll be up there if I get lucky, and we'll still be doing this. It'll probably be the oldest podcast in existence. All right. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Judith. Give people your .coms and final pitch out where they can find you in the book.
Yes, it's .com. And that's the website. Now, another publisher has taken on the book and has republished it. It's through Olympus Story House, and they're merchandising the book, and we'll see what happens with that.
We have a link for it on the Chris
Thank you
Voss
for
show.
this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Judith. And what an inspiring story of hope and dealing with the trials and tribulations of life and living a life where you contribute to others, because we need to do more of that. We're all stewards of each other's on this planet.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Arnold, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places we have on the internet. The book is entitled In the Covenant of the Ark, A Prophetic Journey of Hope. Be sure to pick it up wherever fine books are sold. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.